Here we are for another round of the 70s versus the 90s, and it's real neo-noir when I put Arthur Penn's Night Moves against Tony Scott's The Last Boy Scout. And this was a fun one to get through because both of these movies, like I said, they're neo-noir, and so they're, of course, playing on the tropes of all that film noir stuff laid down in the late 30s and early 40s. And so let's just jump right on into it. First off, we have Arthur Penn's Night Moves, starring the great Gene Hackman. And, the movie itself starts out like your normal film noir detective private eye type shit, and he's an LA detective, kind of seems pretty like at peace with himself, has like a kind of a quirky sensibility, as did most films with Gene Hackman in them, and ends up getting a job to find this missing girl that this old time actress is paying him to do. Like, it's her daughter, and he's trying to bring her back, so he's got to go all the way to Florida. And before he does all this shit, he finds out that his wife is cheating on him with some, like, Harris Yulin. And, he's got a cane and everything, so how the hell you going to beat the shit out of somebody with a cane? So right now, right at that moment, you kind of can tell that this character is real, like, sensitive, kind of at the end of his rope, but still, like, seemingly in control, A dude goes all the way to Florida without addressing his marital issues and stuff, kind of does this whole sneaky private eye thing and stuff. And then when he gets down there, he finds the girl played by a very young Melanie Griffith, and her stepfather is running a charter thing out there and all this stuff. It's pretty basic film noir that starts out great, but then just kind of falls flat about halfway through, because then there's like conspiracies that pop up that are like never really fleshed out, just random shit happens, and Gene Hackman just goes to places and accuses people of shit, and then spends a lot of time whining. I don't go to the movies to see whiny ass bitches, wabs if you will, but it's weird thing noticing, a lot of Gene Hackman movies, they would do that, because Gene Hackman, most notable for like The French Connection, where like he was fucked up, but he was still a bad motherfucker, and this one, like, there's potential to be like a rough and tumble private eye, but he's just kind of lame, and it's a not as bad of cuckery as The Conversation was, but it's cuckery adjacent, like that shit. Of course, Arthur Penn was a director that made a name for himself doing French New Wave films when nobody else really gave a shit in America, before the whole auteurs of the New Hollywood started like buying into that shit. You're really like making their films and trying to rip off either French New Wave or Ingmar Bergman, But the thing about it is, a lot of the European sensibilities don't really translate that well into American cinema. Sometimes they do. There were very few directors that could pull it off, and I'd argue that Arthur Penn's only good movie is Bonnie and Clyde. The rest of his stuff is mighty mid, and this one is no exception, because like even when like the shit all comes to light and everything, it's just kind of like, who really cares at this point, and hear him whining to his wife and all that stuff, and it's just kind of a snooze fest, but disappointing, because the movie starts out really strong, makes a look and kind of makes a joke about French cinema, or not even kind of, he does make a joke, because his wife is going, that's where he finds out when his wife's cheating on him. She's going to an Eric Rohmer film, and My Night at Maud's actually, and he's like, I saw a Rohmer film once, and it's kind of like watching paint dry, and that's kind of how this movie is too. But even in like at the end with the plane crash and stuff, it turns out all this shit's about a fucking like artifact and shit at the bottom of the ocean, and like it just pretty fucking lame. And then we move forward to Tony Scott's The Last Boy Scout, which is the exact opposite of lame. Here we have Bruce Willis playing a private detective who's at the end of his rope, and you can clearly see that this man is at the end of his rope. The beginning of the movie, when we first see him, he's sleeping in his car, ain't been shaven, and his wife's cheating on him too, but he don't whine like a little bitch. He just makes jokes, He walks in, and, a brilliant detective too. That's another point that makes Night Moves trash, is that he's not even that brilliant of a detective. Kind of fucking dumb. He's more worried about like bullshit, instead of focusing on the job. There's a million fucking things that go wrong just because this dude's suffering from cranial rectal inversion syndrome. But Bruce Willis, though, like it's the movie itself, of course, written by Shane Black, directed by Tony Scott. There's no way you can lose. The only combination better than that of Tony Scott directing a Shane Black script is Tony Scott directed a Quentin Tarantino script, which of course was True Romance. But this right, and of course, like Shane Black was really good at writing buddy comedies, and here we also have Damon Wayans, who's a disgraced football player, and they end up teaming up because Bruce Willis was hired to watch out for Damon Wayans' girlfriend in the film, which is Halle Berry, who's finer than frog hair, also playing a stripper at a strip club where Eddie Griffin is the DJ. And, you know, this is pure Tony Scott gold because, like, it has that Tony Scott look and, you know, just the intense action and stuff. Like, you know, great chase sequences. You know, there's a conspiracy going on with, you know, sports gambling and stuff. And, you know, the owner of the LA Stallions in the film. And, you know, that they're all uncovering that. And at the same time, though, like, you know, you see these two guys that don't really like each other but earn a mutual respect for each other, and you know, it's really fucking funny too. That was one thing that Shane Black could do. He could write good action comedies, and you know, especially when you're doing like neo-noir like this, if you're gonna play on the tropes, at least make it interesting. You know, we're not making French films here, we're making American films. You know, and even the French understood, you know, the basis of like film noir and stuff. You know, it's not all about just whining about your feelings and stuff, and you know, and like I said, in the movie itself, everything works out in it, you know, and there's just, you know, Bruce Willis's character in this movie is fucking badass, truly a man of his word. Touch me again and I'll kill you, and he fucking knocks Kim Coates' nose all the way through his fucking brain and shit. And just like I said, everybody in the film is great, you know, and talk about dealing with fucked up issues in a fun manner. Like, this motherfucker is trying to uncover, you know, save the guy, the senator that lost him his job, and avenge the death of the guy that was fucking his wife. I mean, it was his best friend before he started fucking his wife, but still, like that right there. But is Bruce Willis sitting around spending the whole movie whining? No, he's fucking shit up, cracking jokes, and getting shit done. What does Gene Hackman do? He gets like everybody killed, you know, and the only motherfuckers that die in The Last Boy Scout are the ones that deserve to, the bad guys, the heavies and all that shit. So this round's clearly got to go to The Last Boy Scout. I mean, of course, Tony Scott, a far superior director to Arthur Penn. Arthur Penn made a lot of mid movies. Like I said, Bonnie and Clyde was his only great film, and your Night Moves could have been great if, you know, but like, if you're gonna make a parody of something or like a satire, at least, like, you know, go Altman style and still make a real ass movie. You know, just don't put me to sleep. The thing about Last Boy Scout, that movie doesn't put you to sleep. And like, Bruce Willis like commands the screen. Like, you know, I don't really think he was ever more badass than in The Last Boy Scout. And of course, Damon Wayans, a really great actor, you know, not just a great comedian, but a great actor who can like definitely go back and forth with ease, you know. So like a true professional entertainer, you know. And of course, you got fine ass Halle Berry in it too, you know. So like I said, it goes to The Last Boy Scout because that's what movies should be. Movies should be fun. You can deal with serious issues and, like, you know, with personal shit, whether it's a guy going through marital issues or like even conspiracies, like, you know, the greed of corporate America, all this shit, and, you know, organized sports and all this shit, and still having it, because like you don't really give a fuck about that shit initially, but you go back and watch it and then be like, oh man, maybe they had a point about that, you know. So for anybody keeping score, that's 39-33. 70s are only up by 6 now. The 90s come back. It's second time in a row 90s have come back. So, you know, like I said, you got to watch out for the 90s. They can creep up on you. For as great as the 70s was, the 90s had certain, where the holes that the 70s had, the 90s kind of filled those holes, taking the tools that the 70s gave them and, you know, really running with it and shit. And The Last Boy Scout is proof of that. Of course, like I said, Tony Scott, one of the greatest directors of all time, especially for action. And of course, Shane Black, one of the greatest screenwriters for, you know, buddy comedies and everything. You know, that guy's like the king of buddy comedies. The only person that probably like tops him with that is Walter Hill. But anywho, like I said, if I said anything wrong, anything you disagree with, feel free to eviscerate me in the comments. If you got any suggestions, or potential collaborations, I'm all over the place doing stuff. You'll see more of these matchups whenever I have free time and stuff and all that good jazz. So spooky season, prepared to get frightened, you know. As I said, the summer's over, but this shit's only heating up.